So you talked a little bit about here, I thought it was kind of interesting was the performance enhancing drug era of like the 90s of
Mm,
mountain biking. And, my for myself actually, like, when I was an athlete, there was the direct sort of issue that I was dealing with around that time was there was a speed skater who was um, he was like winning everything, and he actually got caught twice in two different doping infractions. And then I
mhm,
was also a big track and field fan, and I was watching like Justin Gatlin get caught, for doping, and
mhm,
then obviously Lance Armstrong and like all this stuff kind of coming through. Looking at performance enhancing drugs, and like there's this frustration that comes with being an athlete that's like
mm.
not taking in performance enhancing drugs, and everyone else is taking it. But what was interesting to hear you say is that like you kind of had to make that decision of like, am I going to take performance enhancing drugs or not? And that's the only way I could be competitive.
Right. Yeah, or at least, yeah, I'd say that, yeah, it was maybe not the only or at least it seemed like an unfair advantage to, yeah, that I was losing, right? So,
Right.
or I don't think in hindsight, like, I feel like I used that decision of like to stop racing at that point as like I used the performance enhancing drug kind of like issue as maybe a final reason to stop racing at that point. I think that I'd gotten to the point of like I was realized that I wasn't going to be able to make a living doing it in a meaningful way, and
Right.
so I needed to do something else, right? To like it was going to be harder and harder to get contracts to get paid, and so I needed to pursue something else. And but I think that so there was definitely like I wasn't quite as talented enough, even if we were a level playing field and no one was doping, like um I probably wouldn't have been able to do it. So or able to compete at that level.
Yeah.
However, like then the doping thing just makes it worse, right? It's like, okay, well, if I'm not gonna be a doper, then I'm gonna be extra far behind.
Yeah.
So that's
Like
kind of
I've sort of gone down the rabbit hole of like the like in different times of looking at performance enhancing drugs and like
mm,
where do you draw the line?
oh, for sure.
Because you can pull it obviously like people will go steroids bad. Like that's kind of the general overarching theme in like mainstream sort of media and like people see it. But there's so much nuance to it. And you look at what every like different countries are doing, especially like you looked at like what Russia is doing, and they're not even allowed to compete at the Olympics. Like they have a separate sort of entity that compete in the Olympics now because they have these systematized doping programs where they'll literally like push the boundary. Every time that the doping programs catch up to what they're doing, they're already ahead of it by a little bit more. They have the new thing or whatever it is. And there's more money in winning than there is in catching athletes for doping.
Yeah, 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 yeah. You're hitting the nail on the head with that. That yeah, the dopers are always kind of or the good is the doping science is always one step ahead of the doping detection, right? It's like and that's how it has to be. I mean, but yeah, been in the fine line between what's okay and what's not okay. Yeah, it's really tricky. There's a gray area, and there's like probably stuff that you obviously would say is wrong, and then but then there's going to be a gray area as well. Yeah, that's tricky. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like stuff's like way cleaner than it used to be. Especially in cycling world. There's definitely like doping positives that still come through the system, but it's not like a systematic approach to the entire sport anymore. It's like,
Yeah.
it's maybe I'm naive and I don't see it, but I feel like it's yeah, pretty dang clean these days.
Well, have you seen it's like the enhanced games or whatever they're called?
Oh yeah, yeah, the
Yeah.
enhanced game.
It's
Yeah,
where it's
what
like
kind
anything goes. Just like, like get as much EPO and steroids and everything and like throw it all in your system and just like see how, what you can compete at it.
what you
I
can
haven't done
do.
much more looking into just like understanding the concept of it, but like the enhanced games, right? Like get these mutants out there competing against each other.
Yeah, that's wild. Well, and I thought about that a little bit, back then when I made that decision to stop because of doping. It was kind of like, I'd put so much effort in my life into, trying to get to be able to compete at the highest level in the world, and the analogy I used with it was kind of like, you're into like Olympic wrestling, right? So, you're come up through the ranks and then you get into like, World Cup wrestling or something and you walk into your first match and then you realize it's like, like like fake professional wrestling, like WWE or something like that. Like you walk in and
Yeah.
like, Hulk Hogan or, I don't know, the famous, like, big, those kinds of characters. And you're like, wait a
Yeah,
minute,
yeah.
this is different than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sport that I signed up for. This is like some other show that I'm not, that I don't connect with. Like, what's going on here? So that's kind of like what what I thought about at that point is like, I don't even know if I want to be part of this like just junk show. So,
Right. Right. Yeah, and it's like it definitely like brings the focus back to I think, in certain sports you can be a little bit immune from the performance enhancing drug stuff because there's these pure athletic sports like, talking about like track and field, for example,
Mhm.
where you're gonna, you had like the doping era of like what was it, like the 70s, 80s, where there was all these records that were just set because it was like it mattered so physical performance mattered so much more than like the technique that you were putting down, right?
Right.
So the technique in a way acts as a bit of a filter for performance enhancing drugs. The more technical a sport, the less likely you're going to be uh,
Mm.
good. The less likely performance enhancing drugs will um, help you. But that being said, there's other things that are going to help, like maybe it's like nootropics or things that are like mind enhancing, as focus enhancing in some ways.
Mhm. Yeah, and you think about, well, I mean, there's definitely like commonly accepted performance enhancing drugs that we use to our advantage, like like caffeine is a has like creatine, things like that that
Yeah.
are substances that you would take to enhance your performance that are widely accepted. I think that, and there actually used to be a level of caffeine that was unacceptable. Like I think there was
Right.
an up
Yeah, I
limit.
remember this. Yeah.
Um, did away with that at some point. But I think that part of it was I guess like like they're trying to judge like how what are the risks of taking these substances or and judging it somewhat on that too.
Yeah.
Um yeah, it's kind of funny like, oh, okay, well, caffeine and creatine are like very well studied and very well understood to be performance enhancing, so but it's
Yeah,
okay.
I love that you brought that up. I remember that. I remember them saying, at one point I was competing and they were like, "Oh yeah, like you can take caffeine, it's totally fine, but above a certain threshold, it's considered performance enhancing." Like
Right.
think about it. That's like a couple of cups of coffee and you're like, you're getting the same infraction as somebody who potentially is doing steroids for, that could be like that's why it's so gray, right? Like I think
Yeah.
it's important for people to understand like how gray the line sort of is. Like, these standards are constantly changing and there's constantly new banned substance coming out. They're adapting things and they're saying like it's not just like it's not black and white.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think the level of caffeine was like you had to be like injecting, an intravenous caffeine or something to like achieve that level. Like it was some kind of ridiculous. Were you a part of or your program with speed skating and stuff? Did you have like the registered testing pool where they would like
Yeah,
you had to like update your whereabouts and have like that whole scene? Yeah. So
exactly.
do you
Yeah.
have yeah, when I came back to racing again, that I was a part of that program where we were sort of like under more scrutiny by U.S. anti-doping, and then so we had the like the phone app where you had to like update your whereabouts, and they every day basically, and then they could come and do these random tests on you, and and you would end up getting tested like way more often, and and then there's all the fear of like accidentally ingesting things that you didn't even know
Oh
you'd
yeah.
getting busted for it. It's like trying to be really careful with supplements and, like all that kind of thing is wild.
Yeah, we
Um,
had our sort of testing and stuff, but again, it's so much more complex and nuanced than like a lot of people realize, and you just don't know what everyone else is taking. So like, how are you supposed to? It's a really difficult decision without all the variables to totally understand.